Welcome to Frontline. Welcome to Frontline Dispatches on Organizing Upgrade, a show dedicated to spotlighting the most urgent left organizing and activism around the country and beyond, focused on racial and economic justice and much more. Stay tuned for future episodes every Wednesday from 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central Time, and 4 p.m. Pacific. I'm Diana Robinson. I'm a labor educator, activist, and organizer, and I'll be your host today. Today, we'll be hearing from Axel Fuentes, the Executive Director of the Rural Community Workers Alliance in Milan, Missouri. The Rural Community Workers Alliance has been fighting on the front lines to ensure safe communities and safe workplaces for food industry workers. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you leave questions in the comment section or in the chat. In addition to that, make sure you like us on Facebook and subscribe to our channel on YouTube and to stay up to date with all the current content coming out of Organizing Upgrade. Make sure you sign up on our website to hear about upcoming videos, articles, and other great skills for organizers on the left. All right, let's go ahead and get started. The COVID-19 virus has impacted the way we eat, the way we spend time with friends and family. In addition to that, it's also impacted the way we work. While many people have been able to stay home and work, many frontline essential workers have to report in person to work and put their lives at risk. Food and manufacturing workers make up 30% of these frontline essential workers, the second highest number to healthcare workers. Food and manufacturing workers, in particular meatpacking workers, have not been provided with adequate protection at work during this crisis. I'd like to welcome our guest, Axel Fuentes. Hi, Axel.
Hi, Diana. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so great to connect with you on this level. We did great work together at the Food and Workers Alliance. Can you tell me a little bit about what work the Rural Community Workers Alliance is doing and what kind of workers you all are organizing?
Well, Rural Community Workers Alliance is committed to find out the needs and concerns of immigrant and refugee workers, especially from the meat processing plants. And we are organizing meat processing plant workers, specifically up here in northern Missouri.
So before COVID, meat processing workers already faced many challenges in the workplace. And all of us we've heard about the horror stories happening in poultry processing plants during the COVID pandemic. What are the biggest challenges workers face in meat packing plants? And how have these conditions worsened during COVID?
Well, I think now the biggest challenge for the workers is having a safe place to work. Every day the workers are getting up. Today are obviously without fear of getting infected. As most of you know, meat processing plants been hotspots of this COVID-19. And that's obviously fear, a lot of fear on the workers for getting infected. I hear many stories of workers that they say, well, I'm going to work without knowing if I'm going to be bringing this virus to home and pass it to my grandparents or my family and spread it in the community. So it's not only a workplace issue, this is a community issue that is affecting a lot to the workers.
So how have employers responded to COVID? What have they done to respond to COVID? I've heard that a lot of big companies have requested from the USDA and the government to speed up line speeds to keep up with production. Can you tell us more about that and how that impacts workers?
That's a really big problem now. If there will be one thing to address, it will be the speed of line, because yes, a lot of the companies been requesting that, and this is creating a big problem for the workers because due to the speed of line, workers are having a higher risk of exposure to this virus and also higher risk of having injuries for repetitive motion or accidents. Speed of line basically doesn't allow the workers even to have enough time to clean up their noses or mouth because they have to be working really fast. And there is not even time for them to take bathroom breaks, or if they need to wash their hands, or if they need to sanitize their gloves. So there is not, and the speed of line is actually hurting a lot of the workers. Unfortunately, the companies, yes, they've been requesting this, and workers are feeling hopeless because there are no regulations for the speed of line now. So it's all up to the companies, and the companies are obviously speeding that up in order to produce more profits.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about what the line speed is for viewers who might not be familiar with that?
The line speed is basically the number of pieces of meat that the workers have to elaborate per minute. In other words, could be also the load of the conveyor belt, the load of work that is coming on the conveyor belt. All the pieces of meat are coming on the conveyor belt, so the workers are just having few seconds to elaborate or to make the cuts on the specific piece of meat. So that means that as more pieces of meat they have to elaborate, less time they have. So they have to work faster.
Um, so, what has our Rural Community Workers Alliance been doing organizing around these issues related to COVID? How have workers been responding? What have been some of the things that have been happening um, in the plants, and how have workers been responding to these added pressures of exposure to disease, but also injury and other exploitation in this way?
Yeah, and meat processing plants are actually known very well for the poor working conditions and very dangerous. So when COVID-19 came, it definitely made it worse because the companies were not responding. They were not taking any measures of prevention of spreading this virus. So in a specific case, like in this plant in Milan, Missouri, it was actually almost the third week of April, and the company was running just like if nothing was happening in the world, like if were not a virus going on. And it was until the workers got together and got organized and requested through management to take some measures. And even after that, the company ignored them. In this case, specifically in this plant, the company didn't started to take measures until after Rural Community Workers Alliance filed a lawsuit, and they were forced by the court to take the implement the CDC guidelines. But otherwise, they were not even spreading information about the virus to the workers. And we have to remember that in these plants, the workers are confined, working very close at each other, shoulder to shoulder, and they were not even providing masks to the workers when the pandemic arrived. So it was until the workers got organized through Rural Community Workers Alliance, and they requested some at least PPE, and that was the only way how the company was forced to implement CDC guidelines.
Mm. So you shared a little earlier how this goes beyond the workplace and how it impacted communities and homes and children and family members. Can you share more about what workers had shared with you, how this was impacting them, how what stress this was adding to their lives?
Yeah, I remember specifically in this community when the school shut it down, so the kids were staying at home, but the workers keep working, keep attending to work in the plant. So a lot of the workers were very, very stressed out, and I even hear stories from workers having panic attacks, because they were getting up every day just with that stress, without knowing if they were going to be infected. And we have to remember also that in January or March and February, we didn't know much about this virus, and there was a lot of things in the media too. So people were really stressed out, and there was not much information coming from their employers. The employers were just running the companies as normal, and that's a big problem in the community, because they can. A lot of the comments from the workers were like, "Well, what's the point of shutting down the school if we still keep working crowded in the cafeterias or in the hallways in the plants?" So they didn't see that. They didn't see a point of shutting down the schools if they were still working crowded in the meat processing plants.
And just a reminder to viewers that you can add any comments or questions in the chat or the comment section if you have any questions. So Axel, can you tell us a little bit more about other strategies of how workers are fighting back against what's been happening in these plants, how they're working with the community to address these issues? I know in the past, Rural Community Workers Alliance has really tried to bridge a gap that exists among workers in terms of racial divides. Can you talk a little bit more about that kind of work that you all do?
Yeah, Rural Community Workers Alliance been trying to address this racial division that existed in most of the meat processing plants, because I have to say that in most of the plants, the majority are immigrants from different countries, either Africans or Latinos or Burmese, so from different countries, and that created a kind of racial division. So we've been working to address racial division, bringing groups of workers from different races to just to even just to have a conversation and to talk about their similarities, to talk a little bit about their culture, even their food, in order to create a sense that we all are coming as a humans, and regardless of the color of skin or regardless our race. Unfortunately, as you can see, for example, in meat processing plants, uh, the plants are in the majority workers of color, or immigrants. But in the corporate offices, you can see the majority are probably white, and they are spacing out in the corporate offices, but not up here in the plants, in the floor. You still see the workers working shoulder to shoulder, only separated by a plastic divider, and they think that that is not enough. Different issues are arising now after the pandemic also, that the companies are not addressing. I can give you an example that may not be a racial thing, but for example, the masks. A lot of the workers, remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we were requesting masks, but now the workers are saying, well, the problem is that we cannot breathe because the speed of line is too high. We are sweating a lot, so these masks are getting really wet, which sticks on the nostrils, and they cannot breathe. So, and the company is just saying, okay, at break time, go and get a new mask. But in this plant, they are only getting two breaks in shift. So it's not enough, and they are not trying to address that kind of problems. Uh, Another example is how the companies are not replacing workers that are staying at home in quarantine. For example, if in a day 50 workers are not attending to work, they are not replacing those workers. So the production is still getting done. So the production is still the same with less workers. So obviously that is exhausting the workers. And I hear stories up here that workers that say, oh, I cannot even get up the next day because I feel my body so sore because we've been working too much in the day before.
Yeah, so you really bring up an important point that this pandemic has highlighted for many is how we already knew the inequities that existed in our society, particularly in the food system, where we see the majority of people doing this work are people of color, and how those people are often put at risk, and essential workers have been put at risk. And we see that the majority of those workers are people of color as well. Can you talk a little bit about, you talked about how workers are not replaced when they're in quarantine. What has been the impact? Have there been deaths at these plants, and what's been happening with that?
Yes, and I think in most of the plants, at least they have experimented a person that died for the COVID-19. We did have a person up here in our community, and I hear in other plants. I don't have the numbers exactly at this moment to tell you how many people died in the plants. That means because working in the plants, that they got infected in the plants. I had to tell you that at the beginning, workers didn't want to go back to work. They were forced. They were forced to go to work. And in our community, I hear stories from many workers that they say, okay, I wish the company could at least shut it down for 2 weeks to get disinfected and to have a quarantine to contain the virus, but they never did. Instead, they were forced to keep it open. They were forced to go to work every day, even when they didn't have enough PPE to contain the virus.
Oh, sorry. So we do have a question, Axel, from Laura. It says, "Hi, Axel. Thank you for being here to speak on this. Is there an ask for government to ensure worker safety in the meat packing industry? So, is there any requests for government regulations for safety in the meat packing industry?"
Workers don't see that there is regulation right now at this point. Unfortunately, it has been a problem because that's why the workers are feeling hopeless because they don't even know where to go to file a complaint. And there is no regulation, even when we say, okay, physical separation, the companies are not implementing that. And there is no regulation, it's voluntarily. The CDC guidelines were put it up there if only if the companies wants to implement it. We did have an OSHA inspection up here, I think 3 months ago or so. We don't have an answer yet. And for what I have read in articles, and I know in these plants where OSHA also conducted investigations, as far as I know, only two fines were issued to these plants, and with really small amounts of money. I hear that one was for $13,000, I guess. So that's the value of a worker. So honestly, the workers and they are feeling like government is not doing enough to protect them. Is sending them to work every single day, but not protecting them. That's the feeling that most of the workers are getting up here.
Yeah, I had spoken to another organizer that organizes in poultry processing, and she had shared that literally workers feel like every day they're being sent to the slaughterhouse, literally, where they're working in a slaughterhouse, but they themselves are putting their lives at risk of dying also of this virus. So we seem to be in an important moment in our country. There's a lot more focus on economic and racial justice. In addition to that, there's growing consciousness about essential workers and appreciation for the work they do. Do you think that this COVID-19 virus or pandemic is an opportunity to shift the narrative that exists around essential work and the people that do that work? Do you think this is an opportunity to shift that and for this to continue?
Well, the way how I see this is an opportunity for the consumers to know what's behind of the plate of food. It's an opportunity to realize that workers are exposing their lives every single day in order to get food for people, and they are not being recognized. Um, just to give you an example, there are no regulations for the speed of line. There are no regulations for bathroom breaks. People in these companies been defecating on themselves, urinating on themselves, and there is not regulation for that. There is not now any enforcement of physical separation. So we are leaving the workers to deal with their employers if the employers wants to implement something. But honestly, they are totally unprotected. And I think COVID-19 brought one more item to the bag. But working conditions in the plants always been poor and terrible. I hear many stories, and I've been here for 12 years, and I still have not been able to hear a positive stories from the workers.
So what can people do to support meatpacking workers? Are there some actions that people can take to support these workers and to put pressure on the government so there are regulations? What can we do to help?
As I always said, I think consumers definitely should know what's beyond the package of meat that they are buying on the store. Consumers should be wise and smart on electing public officials, because a lot of the public officials, remember, they are the ones that they have in their hands to take the decisions, the opportunity to take decisions. If they don't take the right decision to protect people, the consumer should know that. The consumer should know that workers deserve dignity and respect. However, we are not providing that. The consumers also should know that buying from the mass production or from the big companies, the consumer is also exposed to eat food that may be at risk of being contaminated. So as a consumer, I will say it's better buy local from a small producer. Uh, to give you an example, in the big companies or the big plants, for example, USDA is testing just randomly. But for a small producer, every single piece of meat is being inspected, every carcass. But in the big companies, they are not. They are just randomly doing. And I hear many stories from workers that saying, okay, in many cases, they know, even the workers know that the food is being contaminated. And in few words, I'm going to tell you a story that I hear at once from a worker that told me that when they cut, for example, abscess that is coming in the meat, and the pus spreads on the conveyor belt, because the speed of line, because there is not a regulation that right now, there is no time to clean up. So the more meat is passing by that pass, by that conveyor belt. I'm sorry, and that makes the meat to be exposed also. If the workers do not have enough time to clean their mouth or their nose, obviously there are stuff coming or falling on the meat. The workers are not even having time to dry their sweat. So that sweat is falling on the meat too. So consumers should know that.
So it seems what's important is really that there's an ask of government that there should be a regulation around line speeds. In some cases that the current line speed might be too high. And so we have another question from Gerald. It says, hi, Axel, can you talk about the alliances Rural Community Workers Alliance has with national and regional organizations and how they have supported your organizing?
Yeah, we do have many organizations in the national level and local level also that have been supporting our effort and been supporting our organization too. One of the examples is just recently when we filed the lawsuit against Smithfield, we did have a lot of support that many organizations around the country, either to the organization, but most for the workers.
And I know Rural Community Workers Alliance is a member of the Food Chain Workers Alliance and also works closely with the Heal Food Alliance that kind of looks at all these intersections and also brings food workers together for support and national strategy. So again, if there are any questions from the audience, feel free to put it in the chat or in the comments section, and we'll address it. We have a few more minutes. So Axel, before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts to share with our audience?
Yes, I can tell the audience that we are in a very important year this year, especially when we are going to have elections, but for COVID-19 too. If we don't protect our workers, we cannot ask to have a good quality of food. So that's my final thought.
Thank you, Axel. Thank you so much for joining us on our first new episode of Frontline Dispatches on Organizing Upgrade. To the audience, if you enjoyed the show, please stay tuned every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central Time, and 4 p.m. Pacific. You could check in on Facebook or YouTube to check out our guest and our host. Also, make sure to check out the Organizing Upgrade website where you can learn more about left organizing strategy, videos, and articles. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Thank you again to you, Axel, and thank you to the production team. Thank you. So please make sure to join us again next week. If there are any final questions, please post it in the chat. But again, thank you for joining us for this important conversation. Really, thank you, Axel, for highlighting meatpacking workers and food workers who are often invisible in our society, the people who help us eat each and every day, but during this pandemic have continued to do that and putting both their families and their own lives at risk. So we should all be very thankful for that and do whatever we can to support those workers. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to Frontline Dispatches. Please check us out again next Wednesday, same time, 7 p.m., 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you.